They will never appreciate you until they are forced to. That sentence echoed in my mind years after everything had fallen apart, when I realized I had lived my whole life like someone begging for love. There were days I woke up just to wait for a message, a compliment, a look that confirmed I was good enough to exist in someone's eyes. And on that journey, I willingly bowed down, shrank myself, and traded my peace just to hear someone say I was worthy. But this world does not give you value. It only reflects how you treat yourself. When you kneel, it puts its foot on your back. When you stand up, it begins to step away. I once believed that kindness would be returned, that if I was good enough, patient enough, and gave enough, others would see and appreciate it. But no, people do not value what they see every day. When you are always there, they learn to take your presence for granted. When you keep yielding, they think you are weak. When you keep giving, they start to believe you have nothing worth keeping for yourself. I had to learn that lesson in bitter silence, watching someone walk past me as if I had never existed. No goodbye, no regretful glance, only an emptiness pressing on my chest like a stone. And the question, why did I let that happen? The answer came one winter night, as I stood by the window watching yellow lights blur through the mist outside. I remember that feeling as clearly as if it were still in the air. The coldness of someone who had given too much, only to realize there was nothing left to keep. That was the night I understood that power does not lie in being loved, but in being needed. And to be needed, you must become someone who cannot be easily replaced. Not by pretending to be distant or wearing a proud mask, but by truly understanding who you are and what you bring that no one else can. The world does not give you value. It only reacts to the signals you send. If you show that you are always willing to endure, it will make you carry more. If you reveal that you need them more than they need you, the game is over before it starts. In every relationship, the one with power is the one who can walk away without breaking. I realized this after being left behind, after doing everything to prove I was worthy. But in the moment I stopped proving, I finally began to be seen. There is a kind of silence that is not escape, but declaration. When you stop speaking, stop explaining, stop begging, you make the world wonder. People start to ask themselves, what has changed in him? Why does that calm look feel so unsettling? They do not know that calmness is the result of no longer playing their game. You start to build your own frame of reality, where you are no longer the one reacting, but the one defining. Everything in life happens within a frame of perception. Whoever holds that frame holds the power. When you walk into a room, what you need first is not attention, but for the space to adjust to your rhythm. Others may talk loudly, give orders, act superior, but if you stay still enough, they begin to align with your energy without realizing it. Because people are not afraid of voices, they are afraid of certainty. A calm person, unhurried, without the need to explain, makes everyone take half a step back. I saw that once in an old meeting at work. A man walked in, said nothing, just stood and looked at the noisy room. Within seconds, the room fell silent. Not because he shouted, but because of the way he stood, making it impossible to dismiss him. He did not ask for attention. He was the center of it. That was when I understood that true power does not need noise. It comes from a natural presence that cannot be imitated. I spent years after that cultivating that kind of energy, not to dominate, but to stay free from meaningless games. Have you ever noticed that people only listen when you stop trying to be heard? When you stop pleasing, they start wanting to please you. That is the instinct of power. It does not need threats, only the quiet certainty that you cannot be controlled. This world, by nature, is not fair, but it responds truthfully to the signal of confidence. If you radiate the energy that you can lose everything and still be yourself, no one will dare to underestimate you. That night, as the wind howled through the old window frame, I wrote in my journal, "From now on, I will not seek permission to exist." Every step I have taken since began from that sentence. I learned to stay silent when misunderstood. I learned to walk away when I was taken for granted. And strangely, it was that walking away that made people start to turn back. Because the world only fears losing what knows how to stand alone. I no longer want to be good in anyone's eyes. I only want to be someone of substance in my own world. Not arrogance, but self-respect. Not coldness, but awareness. When you know your worth, you no longer fear losing someone's love, Because you understand that true love will never ask you to shrink to be accepted. I do not know where you are hearing this. Maybe on your way home, in a quiet room, or in a sleepless night. But if you have ever found yourself begging for someone to see you, stop, take a deep breath, and remember, the world only treats you the way you allow it to. When you stand tall, it must look up. When you speak less, it must listen. And when you stay silent long enough, it begins to realize that losing you is a loss beyond measure. From that moment, everything begins to change. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow and certain shift, like dawn replacing the night without warning. And I understood. The journey to being valued does not begin by learning to impress, but by learning to stop needing to. When you stop asking for permission to exist, the world starts treating you as an essential part of it. And from that moment on, you become untouchable. Not because you hide your feelings, but because you have learned to move through them without losing yourself. You no longer need recognition, because you have become the one who affirms your own worth. You no longer fear being replaced, because you know that no one can replace someone who truly knows who they are. And in that final stillness, you become the storm they can never find in anyone else. Every game begins with a frame we step into without realizing it. Some people are born at the center of attention. They do nothing, yet the world naturally revolves around them. But most of us are different. We walk into rooms where the rules are already written, the order already set, and the perspectives already drawn. And we start playing by that frame, trying to be accepted in a world that was never built for us. Then one day, you stop and realize that the frame is not real. Every value, every position, every compliment is the creation of someone bold enough to define it first. If you do not control the frame, you will live trapped inside someone else's story. A frame is not just a context. It is the lens through which people judge everything. Who is stronger, who is right, who deserves more. When you walk into a conversation, a relationship, or a negotiation, your frame decides whether you are the one asking or the one giving. If you come with the energy of someone seeking approval, they will sense it like the scent of weakness in the air. They will test your limits, see how much you can take, and you will begin to shrink. But if you walk in with the calm of someone who has nothing to prove, the world slows down, unsure how to respond to you. In that hesitation, you begin to reshape reality. I once saw this in an old man at a small suburban cafe. He was not dressed elegantly, nor did he speak loudly. But when he sat down, the whole room shifted. The staff became more careful. Conversations slowed. Even people adjusted their posture. I asked the owner, "Who is he?" He smiled and said, "No one knows for sure. Only that everyone wants his attention." That was when I understood that power is not sound, it is frequency. Some people emit a quiet energy that makes everything else fall still. To control the frame, you do not need words. You need presence. When you walk into a space, let your breath command it. Do not rush. Do not try to impress. Do not fill the silence with empty talk. People fear silence because in silence, they begin to hear themselves. But you, if you are strong enough to stay silent, they will hear you even before you speak. When someone tries to dominate the conversation, look directly. Do not react. Every loud person is weak. The ones who truly hold power are those who make others adjust their rhythm. Controlling the frame is an invisible art. It does not come from public authority, but from making others believe that only you can see the full picture. When you speak, they believe your words are truth. When you stay silent, they assume you know something they do not. And from that moment, the roles shift. You are no longer a participant. You are the author. No threats, no tricks, only the quiet certainty of someone who no longer needs to be believed. In relationships, the frame decides who can hurt whom. If you place yourself in the role of the one who waits, you will live by another person's heartbeat. Every message, every glance, every word from them becomes a wind that carries you away. But if you build a different frame, the frame of someone who can give without needing to receive, the energy changes direction. You are no longer controlled. You become the chooser. People sense that the same way they sense gravity. They start leaning toward you, not because you pull, but because you have become the silent center in a chaotic world. Once, I was invited to a small negotiation. On one side was a group of young, eager people. On the other, a quiet, middle-aged man who barely spoke. Throughout the meeting, they tried to persuade him with arguments, numbers, and promises. He only listened, nodded occasionally, and smiled softly now and then. When they finished, he said one sentence: "You have 5 minutes to ask yourselves what you truly want." Then he stood up and left. 5 minutes later, the room was still silent. They did not know what to do, afraid to make a move. He did not win by argument. He won by controlling the frame, by making them redefine their own needs. The world outside is a series of frames nested within one another. The frame of society, of media, of expectations. Everyone is trying to live inside a picture that was never theirs. But if you are brave enough to redraw it, to say no, to redefine what matters, you will see everything around you begin to shift. When you speak slowly, others slow down. When you stop chasing, they start walking toward you. When you no longer need to be acknowledged, they begin to fear losing your presence. That is the most silent kind of power a person can have. The ability to make the world adjust itself to you. Controlling the frame does not mean manipulation. It means reclaiming authorship of your own reality. No one can make you feel small unless you accept their lens. No one can define failure for you unless you agree that it is failure. Everything is a matter of perspective. When you change the frame, the world changes with it. A criticism can be an insult in the frame of the weak, but a lesson in the frame of the strong. A goodbye can be a loss in the frame of attachment, but freedom in the frame of awareness. And slowly, you realize that true power is not about winning over others, but about not letting them define you. You can sit among a crowd and still be the center, not because you take the light, but because you carry it within. When you know how to control the frame, you no longer seek power. You become the place where power lives. And in that silence, the world begins to listen the way you want it to. There was a time when I believed that constant presence was the only way to be loved. I showed up everywhere, replied to every message, was always ready, always there the moment someone needed me. I thought that was how I proved I mattered. But the more I appeared, the more I faded away, like a song played so often that no one truly hears it anymore. People do not value what they have too much of. They only crave what they might lose. And it is only when you step back that they begin to feel the emptiness you leave behind. Absence, when done right, is not withdrawal. It is the creation of space. When you are no longer there, your words echo longer, and memories once small suddenly become impossible to ignore. Like a scent lingering in a quiet room, it draws them back, just to confirm that you are truly gone. In that silence, they start to wonder, where are you now? Do you still think of me? And while they are lost in those questions, you remain still and calm, letting the emptiness do its work. The power of absence lies in timing. You must step back while your image still lives in their mind, while you are still someone they want to hold on to. If you wait until you are forgotten, leaving is no longer a choice. It is defeat. Disappear while they still need you, before they are ready for the space you leave behind. That kind of departure should be like a door softly closing, no noise, but enough to make them stand still for a long while, staring at the opening and feeling a quiet chill. In this world, those who are always present slowly become invisible. Those who know when to walk away become legends. I saw this in an old friend. He never tried to please anyone, never texted first, never forced his presence at gatherings. But when he arrived, everyone noticed, as if the light in the room shifted. When he left, the conversation kept revolving around him, even though he was no longer there. I once thought that was arrogance, until I realized it was art, the art of absence. Absence not only makes others long for you, it also allows you to hear yourself again. When you stop rushing to prove, to please, to show up just to be remembered, you begin to touch a different kind of quiet. The quiet of someone no longer afraid of being forgotten. You understand that value is not in being present, but in being remembered. And memory is always stronger than presence, because it lives in the mind, not within reach. But be careful. Absence only has power when it is chosen, not when it is a consequence. If you step back out of fear, that is running away. If you stay silent out of pain, that is surrender. But if you know when to disappear to remind others that they have forgotten how to appreciate you, that is strategy. A wise person knows when to step into the light, and when to let it fade on its own. Not everyone is brave enough to leave while things are still beautiful, but only those who do become unforgettable. I remember someone once told me, "Your absence makes everything quiet in a frightening way." I only smiled. I knew that what scared them was not the silence, but the realization that they had grown so used to my presence that they no longer knew how to live without it. Absence makes people look within. It makes them remember, and in that memory you become larger, clearer, even more perfect than you ever were. That is the paradox of the human heart. The less they see you, the more they hold on. And if you are hearing this now, I want you to try something small. Stop feeling the need to always be there. Let a few messages pass unanswered. Let someone wait for you, even just for a moment, not to punish, but to balance. To help them learn that your presence is a gift, not a given. If these words touch something inside you, leave a small trace, a quiet nod, a moment of reflection. Because what I am saying is not only about them, but about you. You deserve to be remembered, not because you were always there, but because you are brave enough not to be. Once, I was invited to a small negotiation. On one side was a group of young, eager people. On the other, a quiet, middle-aged man who barely spoke. Throughout the meeting, they tried to persuade him with arguments, numbers, and promises. He only listened, nodded occasionally, and smiled softly now and then. When they finished, he said one sentence, "You have 5 minutes to ask yourselves what you truly want." Then he stood up and left. 5 minutes later, the room was still silent. That is not harsh power, but the quiet power of absence, something only those who were once taken for granted truly understand. And one day, you will realize that silence is not an ending, but a reminder that you have outgrown the need to be noticed. When you are no longer afraid of being forgotten, you become unforgettable. When you no longer need to be present, you become truly alive, in the deepest way. And so, every step you take away leaves a mark, not in the air, but in the hearts of those who once thought they could take you for granted. This world will test you. It will try to make you believe that disappearing means being forgotten. But the truth is, those who know how to step back at the right time never vanish. They become an echo. When you learn to walk away without asking for permission, when you stop letting the fear of being left behind control you, you start to see your true worth reflected in others' eyes, a mix of respect and regret. People love safety, but that safety blinds them. When you act exactly as they expect, you become part of their script. They know how you will react, what softens you, when you will fall silent. And once they know, they can control you. But when you break the rhythm, when you smile instead of getting angry, stay cold instead of soft, step back when they expect you to fight, they lose their direction. They have to stop, reassess, and in that pause, you regain control. I realize that unpredictability is not an act. It is the reflection of someone who knows themselves so deeply they refuse to live inside a single role. The world wants us to be simple, easy to read, easy to use, but the strong never allow that. They move like water. No one knows what shape they will take next. When you are fluid, you make others cautious, alert, and distant. And that distance becomes respect. Think of the most dangerous creatures in nature. They do not roar or threaten. They hide. They appear only when needed, at the right time, in the right place. A leopard does not chase its prey all night. It waits, patient and silent, then strikes once. Surprise is the highest form of power because it leaves no room for defense. In the human world, it is the same. A single word, a single action, placed at the right moment, can shift the balance completely. I once met a woman like that, gentle, quiet, never showing what she wanted. But when she walked into a meeting, everything stilled, not because she spoke loudly, but because no one knew what she was thinking. She could agree or refuse, save you or expose you, and you were never sure which. That uncertainty made people fear her more than anyone who gave orders. I asked her for her secret, and she said, "Never let anyone hold the map of your mind. When they think they know you, change." That sentence stayed with me. I started changing small things, how I replied to messages, how I reacted to criticism, how I paced my conversations. I stopped being constantly available. When people expected me to agree, I said no. When they expected explanations, I stayed silent. When they expected anger, I smiled. At first, it made them uncomfortable. Then, they grew cautious. And finally, they began to respect me. That respect did not come from affection, but from fear. Fear that they could no longer predict my next move. But unpredictability needs a foundation. It cannot exist without discipline. Unstable people are not unpredictable. They are simply out of control. True unpredictability has strength only when it is anchored in stability. You can change your actions, but never your essence. You can shift the wind, but the tree remains rooted. The strong are those who make others unsure of what they will do, yet still believe that whatever they do, they will win. Once, someone told me I was hard to read. I smiled, because that was when I knew I was on the right path. When people can no longer be certain of who you are, they start to observe more carefully, listen more closely, and in doing so, they unconsciously give you power. They invest energy in decoding you while you simply stay silent, letting them trap themselves in that game. When people have to guess you, they are thinking about you. And when they keep thinking about you, you occupy space. In their mind space they cannot easily reclaim. There are nights I sit alone, watching the streetlights flicker through the window, realizing that I do not need to be consistent to be trusted. I only need to be real enough not to be controlled. Truth is never fixed. It shifts with time, space, and perspective. So why should I freeze myself into one version? A living mind is a moving mind. And when you dare to change, not for others but for yourself, you become free in a way no one can hold on to. Unpredictability does not isolate you. It filters who deserves to stay. Those who need you to be easy to read will leave because they only seek comfort. But those who remain do so because they respect your depth. That is the greatest gift of surprise, not just power, but clarity. You do not need many who understand you, only a few who are wise enough to trust you even when they do not. Silence makes people curious, but surprise makes them cautious. When they can predict you, you are no longer a threat. When they can foresee every reaction, every expression, every breath, you have already been tamed. This world does not respect what is familiar. It only reveres what cannot be predicted. So, after I learned silence, I began to learn change. Not to cause chaos, but to remind myself that I owe no one my consistency. There is a kind of chain people place around their own necks without realizing it attachment. We are taught that to love is to hold on, that to care is to stay, that to let go is to fail. But no one tells us that the tighter we cling, the weaker we become. I once believed that love and loyalty were reasons worth being hurt for. I thought that if I stayed long enough, others would see my heart, until I realized that while I was busy holding on to them, I was slowly losing pieces of my own freedom. Blind attachment is a form of addiction, an addiction to feeling needed. When you let your joy depend on someone's reaction, you give them control over your emotions. You become a puppet of waiting, trembling when praised, collapsing when ignored. The world can easily read the fear in your eyes, and the clever ones will know how to pull your strings. From that moment, you live on someone else's breath, and your true self begins to fade. Not because they took it, but because you gave it away. A strong person is not someone who needs no one, but someone who can walk away without breaking. Controlled detachment is the art of those who have learned to love without losing themselves. You can care deeply, love sincerely, yet still keep your balance, that sacred point where you know you are whole even if someone leaves. This self-mastery does not come from coldness, but from understanding. Everything can be lost, but you cannot. When you realize that you are the source of your own emotions, you stop seeking others to define your worth. I remember once in a negotiation, the other person asked me, "What scares you most if this deal doesn't work out?" I smiled and said, "Nothing." I saw confusion flash in their eyes. They realized I was not tied to the outcome. I could walk away, lose, start again. In that moment, the balance shifted, not because I had more power, but because I did not need victory to feel complete. The one who is not afraid to lose is the one who cannot be controlled. Controlled detachment begins with small things. You choose not to reply right away to a message that stirs anxiety. You stop explaining yourself to someone who has no desire to understand. You stop saying yes to things that drain you just to avoid disappointing others. Each small act is a reminder that you have a choice. And when you choose yourself, others begin to handle you with more care. No one values what is always available, but everyone respects what can walk away. Detachment does not mean shutting down. It means not letting someone else's emotions define your own. You can listen without absorbing their fear, empathize without being pulled into their chaos. Those who master detachment can walk through fire without being covered in ashes. They stand in love but still keep enough distance to see the whole picture. That makes them trustworthy, because they do not depend on anyone else for balance. I once thought coldness was a kind of protection. But then I learned that coldness is fear in disguise, while detachment is true freedom. The cold build walls, the free grow roots. Roots do not block the wind, but they keep the tree from breaking. When you have roots, you do not fear losing branches. When you have a center, you do not fear change. You can love deeply without needing control, care without clinging. And that is when love returns to its pure form, not possession, but choice. The world will test your detachment. It will call you selfish, distant, even heartless. But what they fear is not your lack of feeling it, is their loss of control over you. Those who can walk away without needing proof of love cannot be manipulated. You become calm, like deep water, reflecting everything, holding on to nothing. And that stillness makes others feel small when they stand before you. One of the hardest lessons is knowing when to leave while things are still good. Many stay until they are broken, until their image becomes nothing more than familiarity and routine. But the wise know that leaving while you still shine is the only way to keep your light alive. The right departure ensures you are never diminished. It leaves a space no one can fill, and that space is a quiet reminder that you once existed with irreplaceable value. Controlled detachment is the foundation of inner power. It is a silent declaration. I choose to stay, but I can leave. When others sense that, they no longer take you lightly. They measure their words, weigh their actions, because they know losing you means losing more than a relationship. It means losing a presence that made them see themselves more clearly. In the end, you will understand that freedom is not living alone, but living in the world without being ruled by it. When you love and still remain centered, when you care and still stay calm, when you give without needing to hold on, you break free from the human cycle of dependency. And in that moment, the stillness in your heart becomes absolute power. No one can buy it, no one can take it, and no one can make you forget that the one who can leave at any time is always the one most respected. When you have learned not to depend on anyone, you begin to see a different kind of power, one that does not lie in words or glances, but in what you hold. This world does not run on emotion. It runs on resources. And whoever knows how to direct the flow of resources can bend reality. Money, information, relationships, skills, reputation, they are all forms of the same thing: control. You cannot survive in a competitive world by blind faith in righteousness or goodwill. You need something more practical: leverage. I once thought coldness was a kind of protection, but then I learned that coldness is fear in disguise, while detachment is true freedom. The cold build walls, the free grow roots. Roots do not block the wind, but they keep the tree from breaking. When you have roots, you do not fear losing branches. When you have a center, you do not fear change. You can love deeply without needing control, care without clinging. And that is when love returns to its pure form, not possession, but choice. I once met a woman like that, gentle, quiet, never showing what she wanted. But when she walked into a meeting, everything stilled. Not because she spoke loudly, but because no one knew what she was thinking. She could agree or refuse, save you or expose you, and you were never sure which. That uncertainty made people fear her more than anyone who gave orders. I asked her for her secret, and she said, "Never let anyone hold the map of your mind. When they think they know you, change. A single word from them can open or close doors that money cannot touch." People often say that having good energy is enough. But no, this world is not built on energy. It is built on position. You can be kind, honest, and sincere, but if you lack resources, you will always be waiting for permission. Resources are the shield, the sword, the key to freedom. Yet the frightening truth is this: most people never understand that until everything has been taken from them. They only recognize the value of power when they are forced to kneel before it. Concealment is an art. In the world of power, the one who reveals all their cards has already lost. When they know what you have, they know how to take it. But if they only see a part of your strength, they will stay cautious about the rest. That is why truly powerful people always keep others guessing. No one knows how many moves they still have left. That uncertainty is their armor. You do not need to prove anything, only to make them believe you can do more than they think. Resources are not just for protection. They are tools to shape reality. When you control the flow of resources, you do not just live in the world, you design it. You decide what thrives, what fades, who rises, who stays behind. It may sound harsh, but that is how the world works. Whoever directs the flow of value writes the rules. You can choose to be carried by the current or to steer the ship. And to steer, you must keep learning, keep accumulating. Knowledge is the one asset that cannot be taken from you. Skill is the one currency that never loses value. I remember once, when I had lost almost everything, sitting in an empty room, believing I had failed. But then I realized I still had the most valuable thing of all, the ability to begin again. My experience, my understanding, the connections I had sown, those were resources no one could take. I started rebuilding from zero, but this time, not to show off, but to grow quietly. I learned to invest, not only in money, but in people, in silence, in credibility, because I understood that sometimes a promise is worth more than a contract, and the right handshake can be worth more than a year of effort. Mastering resources does not mean becoming greedy. It means understanding that strength lies not in possession, but in precision, knowing when, where, and how to use what you have. Some people are rich, but powerless. Others have little but command respect. Why? Because the second type knows something the first does not. True resources are connection and information. A person may be poor in their bank account, but rich in influence. But there is a trap in this game. When you start accumulating, it is easy to become obsessed with holding. That is when power reverses. Resources no longer serve you. You begin to serve them. The one who fears loss has already lost. So the key is not how much you have, but how much you can release. True strength belongs to those who can lose without trembling. They are not owned by their resources. They command them like tools, precisely, calmly, without emotion. When you reach that point, you will understand why. Those who truly hold power are always quiet. They do not boast, they do not rush, they do not need to prove. They know their strength lies not in being seen, but in never being fully known. And that mystery makes the world cautious when it speaks their name. They are not legends, but they are treated like ones because they hold the one thing no one can ignore: leverage. Leverage does not have to be large, only well-timed. The right word can save a career. The right connection can open a door to power. The wise do not try to win every battle. They gather enough resources to choose which battles are worth fighting. And in this world, the power to choose is the highest form of freedom. When you have resources, you no longer chase anyone. You no longer need to prove, persuade, or argue. You simply smile, because you know that when others are exhausted, you still have reserves. When they think you are weak, you are resting. When they think you have lost, you are preparing for your final move. And in that quiet patience, the world begins to understand you are not just a survivor. You are the one shaping how it survives. In the end, when you have learned to shape reality, keep your distance, and build your resources, you enter the quietest stage of all, but also the most powerful one. It is the moment when you no longer want to be loved, no longer need to be recognized, but only wish to become someone who cannot be replaced. Not through promises, but through the real value you create. When they need you, you are no longer an option. You are a condition. Those who hold resources do not argue. They do not threaten. They wait. When you know you can survive without rescue, you no longer shout to prove your strength. A person with money, skill, and connection is not arrogant, they are calm. And that calmness is the highest expression of power. It comes from knowing that even if the world collapses, you have enough foundation to rebuild. Being irreplaceable does not come from being better than others, but from being entirely different. Anyone can learn skills, imitate style, or copy success. But no one can copy the energy of someone who has been broken and learned how to rebuild themselves. Those who have touched the bottom know their limits. They no longer fear. because they have already survived worse. That calm certainty becomes a kind of gravity, not charm, but quiet force pulling everything toward it without moving at all. I used to think being irreplaceable meant you could never be lost. But now I understand. It means you can walk away and still leave the world trembling. When you leave a place and everything slows down, when your silence makes conversations hollow, when your absence makes others realize how much they needed you, that is when you reach the position true power strives for, not the center of attention, but the center of necessity. Yet there is a paradox. Once you become irreplaceable, you must learn not to depend on that status. Because if you believe you are unique, you have built yourself a prison. Confidence turns into illusion. Illusion turns into complacency. And complacency is the fastest path to collapse. True power never lies in holding on, but in the ability to let go. When you can look at an empire and not tremble at the thought of burning it down, that is when you are truly free. Being irreplaceable does not mean no one can do what you do. It means that even if they can, they still want you to do it. Because you bring not only results, but a feeling, the sense that everything is steadier, deeper, more alive when you are there. That presence cannot be taught or faked. It is built through every small moment you chose honesty over ease, silence over justification, walking away over begging to stay. Every strategy before this has only led to this point where you no longer chase your place in the world, because they will fight to keep you there. Those small choices add up until one day you no longer try to shine, you simply stand, and the light finds you. But the truly strong do not protect their image. They simply keep being who they are, the same truth that made them irreplaceable in the first place. Eventually, you realize that you no longer want to be remembered for being talented, smart, or beautiful. You just want to be remembered as the person who made others see themselves differently. True influence is not in what they say about you, but in who they become after knowing you. When you help someone grow, you become a part of them. And that is the deepest form of being irreplaceable. I have met people like that. They did not speak much, never tried to impress. Yet every time they left, the room lost its weight. You could not name what made them different, but you felt it. They left a quiet echo in your mind, making you think of them long after the conversation ended. Not because they were perfect, but because they were so real, they made you want to be honest with yourself. That is the mark of someone irreplaceable. They make you see the best part of yourself. And if you go far enough, living long enough in the silence of power, you will realize that being irreplaceable is not a destination, but a state of transcendence, the point where you have outgrown the need to be understood. When you no longer need to be loved, remembered, or explained, yet they still cannot forget you, that is absolute stillness. The moment when the world revolves around you, not because you force it to, but because you have become its natural center of balance. They will speak of you with respect, with fear, perhaps with regret. But whatever they say, they will always know that there is something in you they will never find anywhere else. And once you understand that, you no longer need to prove anything. You simply smile, walk away, and let the silence speak for you. Because in the end, power does not lie in making others bow. True power lies in making them realize that no matter how hard they try, they will never fill the space you leave behind. You are not the one they choose. You are the one they cannot forget. And that is the final form of freedom. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.